Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brace for Reality and Jump for Certainty. Today, we are gathered with our host, Nilo.
Hello.
And we have our dear friend and school colleague, Sara, with us today.
Hi.
How are you all doing?
Pretty good. Early morning, fresh out the breakfast. A bit exhausted after this weekend, have to say.
Yep, I think just to give some context, our time in Hyderabad has actually come to an end, and we've done a lot of work with the companies and presentations. So I think that's why I can agree with Nilo. We're feeling pretty wiped out. Maybe you want to share in detail what we've been up to.
Right. So Hyderabad, after the presentations, we only had one night there, and in the early morning hours at 2 a.m. we actually traveled down to the airport by bus, flew into Delhi. From there, took a bus to the Taj Mahal, and there our longer bus journey started towards Rishikesh, where we are right now. And we were actually on the road for 26 hours.
Yeah, it was
So yeah, that was a long day.
Yeah, from 3 a.m. Our bus came at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And then at one point we look and it's 5 a.m. the next day.
Yeah, it's Sunday currently, so we've been in Rishikesh a couple of days now, a bit further up on actually the Swami Rama Himalayan University campus. And our focus here is on reflecting and kind of triggering the thought process on looking back on the past 3 weeks in Hyderabad.
The theme that we really want to go with this episode is really looking into what have we learned from this 3-week, 4-week immersion, and including our academic journey, but also more how have we personally grown and have we noticed any shifts in our reflection. So Sara, I would really love to hear, how has this whole experience been for you and what have you been reflecting on?
I think for me, the experience started with being two different paths evolving at the same time. So both the personal journey with finding yourself in a new context, being in a new group, around new people, different culture, all of those things. And then it's also the company side of things with finding yourself in a new industry, new company, trying to grasp all of that. And then these two have just been two parallel roads for me, I think. But then the closer we got to the end, I feel like they've sort of become intertwined. And it's not it's the personal journey and the company journey and the academic journey, but it's everything is mixed together. And I think coming to an end, my mind has been a bit all over the place because there's been so many learnings, so many insights. And I think I've had a bit of a hard time navigating through all of that.
Maybe it would be nice to start with what happened in Hyderabad, at least with your companies and your presentations. How has that whole process been? How do you feel about it now that it's actually happened and you've presented?
Yeah, our company, they didn't really present us with one single problem when we got to them, but we have more been working with a lot of different tasks and maybe more on the operational side rather than being an outsider looking in. So I think that we have been doing a lot of different things, and throughout the 3 weeks, I think I've had the feeling of these different things being very unrelated to one another. Coming into the presentation and putting all of the pieces together, it's been very clear how all of these different things that we've been doing sort of play into the same narrative, and that narrative being the story of their business and also the very fundament of their business model.
How has this process more been with your group dynamics and your own development?
I think with the group, it's actually been very good from the start. I think we started off on a good path personally, and sort of tore down a lot of walls in the beginning, which made us become fairly close to one another. And I think that helped us in the work context as well. So I think early on we shared personal things with one another, which helped the teamwork a lot. I think for me that also makes me feel a bit more responsible towards the others when it's people that I care for. And then I think it's just been a lot building on top of that. But I also think that I've realized that sometimes it's a lot easier to work on things by yourself rather than to be working in a group. Because in a group, there can also be a lot of discussions. And I think that our group, there were a lot of people who like to discuss, and I'm one of them. And I think I've become aware of the fact that in a lot of settings, it's a good thing, but it's also important to know when to shut up.
Yeah, I think I need to know that as well.
And when we were working on the presentation, it was almost 2 a.m. And me and a guy in our group, we were sitting in a discussion, and I just felt that this could go on forever if we don't stop it.
Yeah.
And I think that I told him off in a very super not nice way, maybe. And I was like, let's just drop this here. We're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's the hard trade-off of like knowing when to stop talking, but also like if you're in a group with other people who likes to talk, you all need to be sort of like on the same page in order for that to work. Because if the three of us are talking and I feel like we're not getting anywhere, then you also either have to like say that in a gentle way or make sure that everyone else is on the same page, because otherwise the discussion could go on forever.
Yeah.
There, I just have to add on that. I have a similar kind of experience from our group work where now reflecting and looking back at it, it was maybe that we had been in kind of the exploration phase of the group work for an extended period, and it was the time to shift to the exploitation or the execution, if you can call it that. And that can cause friction. So do you have anything from your side that you could maybe elaborate on that from your group?
I think that over time we just became very aware of the fact that if we don't like put an end to the discussion, we could keep discussing forever and ever and ever.
So it was almost like you were a bit stuck in the exploratory phase.
Yeah. And also because you want to be nice to one another and hear what other people are saying. And since there isn't like a clear leader, there's no one who can be telling the other people that, okay, but now we need to come to a decision and move on, sort of. But I think it was for us maybe at the end that we actually talked about the fact that we're very good at discussing, but we need to stop discussing. And like also talked about this quote which says, if I had more time, I'd write a shorter letter. So like being concise in what you're saying is so hard. But I think that's also a skill that I very much would like to master.
I think something really interesting on what you just said now, because we had a reflection yesterday with our group, our kind of final reflection. And we spoke a lot about the different roles that we take on in groups and how that role can often shift also when you move groups. Maybe you're quite loud and you're quite a leader in one group, and then maybe you move to a next group and you're a bit more submissive and don't take as much space and would rather follow. So I feel like sometimes our roles can actually switch. But I think the main thing that at least I think it was another group member actually brought this up. She mentioned how she would like to know her value sooner on in the group process. And I think that our group worked extremely well. We were really lucky with that the dynamics just seemed to, I think we all sought our roles very early on in the beginning and they meshed well together. Everyone brought something different to the table. But I think sometimes we can feel maybe insecure, like when to speak more, when to not speak more. Should I shut up now? Or like, should I actually ask questions now? Do I actually understand what's going on right now? Do I feel lost and it's aggravating me and I should say something? But I think at least this is what I've reflected on now, knowing my value from the get-go is we all, like, I have something valuable to contribute and so does everybody, and being able to give each other the space to let that shine through really makes the dynamic good.
Yeah. But I think that's also maybe what makes it complex, because I think that in a group setting, you want everyone to feel that they're valuable.
Yeah.
But then, like, maybe as you're saying, shifting from the exploration to the exploitation, you also have to put an end to it at some point. I think that's also where I feel that you could compromise giving other people the sense of being valuable, because it comes to a point where someone just have to make a decision in terms of, okay, but guys, now we need to decide on what to do and move forward. And maybe someone will feel that they weren't able to fully express their point or elaborate properly on what they wanted to say, but still, for the good of the group, you still have to do it.
So I think like after this whole process now, Nilo and Sarah, that we've all finished actually presenting and we're out here reflecting, I'd really like to hear, is there anything that you think you would do differently now? Or have you gained any tools over this 3-week process of how you want to manage yourself or how you will manage yourself within a group again?
Just quickly, maybe before we move into that question on what you said, Sarah, it's moving from the exploration to exploitation and the friction behind that. What makes it especially difficult in these group work dynamics is that there is no hierarchy in the field itself, right? The context is very flat. And if you can look at it as an organization, there is no relative differences in terms of experience or positions within the group, right? There's no CFOs, no CEOs, no C-level in itself. So in that flat context and that flat space, who has the authority, right? Who
Yeah.
has the authority to actually shift that group? That's something that I've actually been reflecting on, and something that I've given thought to, is that how does that kind of leadership behind or authority then play, because you don't actually have a title or any true power in that
Yeah.
sense, right? In comparison to others.
Yeah, and I think that's very much the challenge, because it feels like the discussion goes on and on and on because you want to reach consensus, because you don't have a single person who is dedicated to take the decision. But I think that like our mentality has been, we should discuss it and make sure that everyone is on board and reach the consensus, and then we move on.
And I think it's also difficult though, because obviously we were just put assigned into random groups.
Yeah.
We also didn't really know each other from before, and now we have to work with each other. We're also exploring each other's strengths and also having to work with each other's weaknesses.
Yeah. But I think like also on top of that, like when we talk about the hierarchy, I know that I sometimes probably have taken a bit more of a leader role and been like, okay, now I think that we should do this and that. And it's not a role that has been assigned to me. And in all honesty, I don't really know how the others have felt about that at all points. But it's just come to a point where I feel like, okay, but we need to do something. And I've also learned here that I'm very impatient. And it's something that I've been trying to work on, but like controlling the impatience and trying to be patient, sometimes for me at least, it's come to a point where I feel like, but we can't go full circle again with this discussion.
Exactly. I can
Because the
definitely relate.
conversation is saturated.
Yeah, I can 100% agree with that. And I also feel like at some points I've taken the leadership role and kind of pushed the group forward, and been impatient in that when I've felt frustrated because I haven't seen actual progress in terms of
treading
the
water.
discussion translating into
A solution or
yeah,
results.
solution
Yeah.
output, right, inputs for the solution, and it's just been in that discussion phase. And given the time constraints, all of that, of course it triggers me in a way that I'm like, okay guys, we need to move now. So that's something that I have definitely looked back on and realized that the patience is key there. And also, like, if you want to take that leadership position, you need to first know how to follow the group, right? Like, you have to be the follower in the beginning to actually be able to take it forward, because otherwise it becomes a dictatorship, right?
Yeah.
You can't stay ahead the whole time. It definitely is something that it's really interesting to see kind of the different leadership dynamics within the other groups, and it would be interesting to feel like get those inputs as well.
Yeah, because I think like for me, being very similar to what you're describing right now, I can sometimes feel that discussions lead to a place where we're just treading water. It's
Right.
like, okay, now we're just treading water. We're not getting anywhere. We're just on the same place. Blah, 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 blah. But then I've also come to realize that for some other people in that room, they might not experience the discussion as treading water, but maybe as a discussion where they're still trying to understand and grasp and fully learn what we're talking about. Whereas for me, I'm like, okay, I just want to move on. And finding that balance and reading the room in that way, I think that's also what it really takes to be like a good leader. A lot of times in the group here, I don't think that I've been the best at doing that. And I've just maybe felt that I want to move on, and let's move on, and maybe just assume that everyone else is on the same page. But I think overcoming the dictatorship hierarchy, whatever we want to call it, a friend of mine actually gave me a pretty good advice that he always sets a timer before talking about something. If we're like discussing something, it's like, okay, let's set 15 minutes. And after it's 15 minutes, we should have gotten somewhere and should move on. Because then you sort of like in the group decide together that, okay, this is the space we have to discuss this. After this, we can take a decision as to whether we want to move on or whether we want to take it another 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's really about having to make that decision together, which will not cause a conflict.
Exactly. And you sort of like evaluate where we're at. Because otherwise, I think that my experience is that the talking can go on for hours.
Exactly. Especially in these group dynamics, like in comparison to kind of the professional world, where you have continuous time constraints and you have a lot of meetings, right?
Yeah.
So the meetings kind of make sense because you meet around a different subject. But in these group dynamics, especially when you have 3 weeks, that seems like an extended period, and you kind of just paddle the water the whole time, right?
Yeah.
And the discussion may go on and on. So kind of setting those time sequences inside is definitely valuable. The structure is definitely needed.
Yeah.
I think I want to take this a little bit deeper though, and not just maybe. I think that's a really good example of something that you can do in that situation.
Yeah.
But I think for your own self and your own personal development, what have you realized after this trip? Something within or something you've reflected on that you will maybe handle differently. So I mean, you mentioned something about maybe being a bit impatient or.
Yeah, I think so. Like on the side of all this work stuff, I've also been talking a lot with Sudanshu about like me and how I can improve and maybe what I can strengthen. And I think that like two things that have become more clear to me is that I'm very emotional and I'm very impatient. And those two don't play each other very good in these settings. So like when I become very impatient and want to move on, I know that my voice oftentimes gets a bit more sharp and I can come across as a bit annoyed and with like a bit of a hard tone. I mean, it's not that I'm gonna try to erase those things about me,
No, definitely not.
but more in a way that I think I've learned that okay, maybe in these situations when I feel that okay, now come on guys, that okay, maybe take a breath, just think about what it is that I want to say and go it over in my head one more time before I say it out loud, because I think that when I'm in this, I want to just like put it out there and be like okay, but move on. And then for me in my head, it doesn't come across as harsh, but hearing it in the room, it can definitely interpret it in that way.
Yeah, I think something that I really resonate with you mentioning that is I had similar things in my group. I don't know about being impatient, but more that my voice can also, sometimes I've reflected on that my voice can be my greatest asset, but also my greatest weapon.
Yeah, same.
And when I'm stressed or I feel like I really need something and I'm not getting the help or acknowledgement, then I notice that my voice can go very, okay, guys, so can we, and it's like, I'm not realizing like, maybe I'm freaking out people in my group by going, let's all do this now. Da, 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 da. And it's like, you also have to put yourself in the context of, I want to get something out of this situation, but I need to get it out from people in my group. How are they receiving what I'm asking for or what I'm saying? And I think something really valuable that I got out of a reflection with Sudansu was, he was like, Dom, there's nothing wrong with your ideas or what you need, or he's like, don't deny that part of yourself, but there's definitely things that I can reflect on in terms of delivery and communication. And like, I think we always speak about communication is key. But it's like, it actually really does make sense. If I maybe tone it down and ask calmly, hey Sarah, hey Nilo, like, I'm confused with this. Could we please go back and look at this? It's a completely different tone and setting, like what you were saying, adjusting that to getting the result that you want.
Because I think we also had a group reflection in my group where we all got different tasks and different things that we were to observe with each other. So like I, for example, was to observe another person's body language in certain situations, and someone was to observe my voice. And then I became very aware of like the way I use my voice. It's very much like an open window to my feelings. And that's not always a good thing. Sometimes it's a good thing. But it's also like everyone here does not need to know that I'm annoyed. I can keep that to myself because that's better for the group and probably better for me. So I think also like the trade-off between knowing what's good for me and what's good for the group.
I think, yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I think kind of to just start wrapping things up a bit, Nilo, would you like to share with us? By the way, Nilo is actually leaving back to Finland today. So this is the last time that we're going to be with him. And he's had a lot of reflections over the past 24 hours. I think he's completely worn out now. But Nilo, if you have it in you to maybe share what you've been really reflecting on.
Right. Yeah. So it is actually my final episode here in India. We will have one more wrap up in Copenhagen when that is due. I would no time schedule on that, but definitely my reflections have really been on the patient side as well. So having that patience is key, but other things are also kind of like on the emotional side, right? Or I've realized that I have a stronger kind of execution side and going towards that, then there's of course the creativeness in that, but kind of having that human side, empathy, patience, these skills have definitely come more into play, and something that I need to work on and develop and bring into these group dynamics as well, because you in the end of the day, like, the biggest asset to the solution is the group itself, right? So whatever individuals within that group can do and bring in terms of to foster collaboration, foster other people's ideas, listen, understand, it helps to build the value of the solution itself. So those are kind of the things that I want to personally work on in the future, and I've reflected as kind of my development points. So kind of finding that balance between the execution and, hey, let's get this moving, and the other side, the feelings and the humanity and the empathy in it all. So that is something that I've taken from here as a personal learning, and that's something that I wanna put emphasis and effort on.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I think now, just to wrap up, because our time is done, if you have, Nilo, considering that, I mean, it's all of our last days here, any last words that you want to say for your time on this journey?
I just think, like, yeah, building on top of what you just said, actually, that it feels like what we talked about right now, it's a lot of our learning seems to be about how we play ourselves better to play the group better.
Right. And like that with a sprinkle of kind of spirituality on top, you know. It's like it's that.
Well, we are in Rishikesh, so we're in the Himalayas. Will we bring the spirituality back to Copenhagen? I hope so. Oh, but I think that's a great way to leave this. And thank you so much, Sada, for coming on and being so honest and sharing your vulnerability with us. And Nilo, we will say goodbye to you. And yes, thank you for this episode.
Yeah, thank you, and catch you guys on the other side.